So I apologize for any.
Well, we read the report and we're excited to just hear it from the source and maybe have you just to learn and make sense of everything that you learned. You could walk us through the report. You could, lead the conversation however you want, but we're really curious to hear more and just talk and make sure we understand what you've been learning.
Okay, well, yeah, I prepared a PowerPoint, so if I could share the screen, then
Okay.
I'll run through it.
Perfect.
Okay. So you guys see that front page, Heart Forest?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, this is a presentation of the tree inventory and the management plan that I prepared this year. So this look at the historical imagery was very interesting to me, and I think it really tells a story and exposes issues concerning tree establishment throughout the years. So this first image from 1997, that's about 7 years after the initial planting of the eastern red cedars, and we see the center of the heart has been left unplanted. And so moving on to 2004, we start to see areas where trees are doing well, particularly along the southwest line, and where they're failing to establish. And that continues to be seen in 2006. This shot was taken in July. And yeah, there's just clearly areas, particularly in the southeast, where there's failure to thrive. In 2010, basically the same story, although what we're seeing is that the deciduous trees have filled in at this tip. But we're still seeing significant problems in this area of the southeast. This photo from 2015, it's a winter photo. And so you really can see these deciduous trees that have taken over where the eastern white pines could not thrive. And finally, this image from 2023, this was taken just in May. So we see the completion of the drainage project. And we also see where we have undesired growth here at the southern end, at the top of the heart where the two halves meet. We no longer see that triangle where it should be open. So, I was just delighted to put these photos together so that you can see that history.
And Molly, what is it that filled in that, what should be the top of the heart?
When we were out,
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, it's a vacuum. So the ag people are not using it, and it wasn't planted with trees from the heart forest. So we all know that nature abhors a vacuum. It's going to fill in, no doubt. And what we saw together when we were out there in April, and which I saw again, I think is mostly ash trees, volunteers growing up in there, but also herbaceous plants. I'll get into this at the end, but I think it can be controlled, but it will have to be a maintenance activity, because if the ag isn't keeping it in check, then nature will absolutely fill it in.
The 2023 photo looks so full. I mean, it looks like a real heart.
Yeah, it's filled in. But here, let's look at this photo is from 2022 and it's a winter photo. So, sorry, we see that, and I experienced this in the field, that right here is has a lack of certainly pines, and frankly, a lack of any density. This area is more dense, but clearly this is where the drainage was funneling to. That was just the point of the drainage in this gully form that moved to 104th Street. So as you probably already know, all the drainage from this field was just running through this point, running northwest along this area and coming out here. I think there's also drainage that enters from this western side and moves to the northeast. You can kind of see that here, that there's a little bit of less density of the pines. So this project, the remediation project, was completed in March. As you well know, there's large installation of riprap rock, and then this corrugated pipe. There's multiple areas. I saw at least two, and I think there's a third of where this pipe was installed to improve drainage. I saw that in this area, in that southeast. Okay, so moving on to the tree inventory. So this was a random sampling of the 7-acre site. So 14 plots were sampled. That's a 20% sampling intensity on 7 acres. So you can see these blue circles. These are the plots, and every tree that was 4 inches or larger in diameter, at 4.5 feet tall, that DBH, that's how we referred to it, was inventoried. And I collected the species, the diameter, the health, sunlight exposure, and maintenance needs. So in this map begins to tell some obvious parts of the story right away, that this yellow is eastern white pine, and we're seeing that as a dominant species in these plots that were in the outer ring. The dominant species in the interior ring is eastern red cedar, which is the red. And then we have a mix, a more diverse set of species in the inner ring. The other thing to note in this map is that the larger trees are the eastern white pine in the outer ring. Okay, so I collected data on 321 trees, and I processed that data through iTree, and it estimates that there are 1,674 trees in total on 7 acres. Most common trees are the eastern white pine, eastern red cedar, and the white oak. So iTree, the iTree analysis produces these ecosystem services. So for pollution removal, we have almost 900 pounds a year. The carbon storage, this is a snapshot in time. As of May of 2023, iTree estimates that 193.6 tons of carbon is stored in the woody material of the trees. Every year, these trees are sequestering 12.78 tons. And actually that number would increase as the trees get larger as far as the annual. The oxygen production annually 24 tons of oxygen. Avoided rainwater runoff is estimated at 9,700 gallons per year. And the trees have a replacement value, according to iTree, of 1.94 million. Okay, a little bit more about the ecosystem services. So this top graph is the carbon storage. Eastern white pine are doing the majority of the work. That's because there's so many of them, they're the largest. And it kind of works off of the most common trees. The eastern red cedar and white oak are next in line. So same is true for avoided runoff. Eastern white pine, just by nature of, even though their leaves are needles, they're still doing the most in terms of avoided rainwater runoff. And this is a composition graph of species by diameter. And mainly, I just want you to notice that this dark green in the back is the eastern white pine, and they're the largest trees and the most trees of significant size. Okay, so here we're taking a closer look at where there's a failure to thrive, and just what we see growing, as a result of the environmental conditions. And I don't know if somebody was trying to say a comment. Okay, so for example, what we see in this area where the eastern white pines failed to establish are American elm, bald cypress. There are a few pines in there. In this middle ring, as I mentioned, it's the most diverse. White oak, red oak, elms. There are eastern red cedars. We use the word encroaching, kind of a negative word, as opposed to, I also see some pines in there. It's just, just because I value the pines more, I'm not going to use a negative word of encroaching. So, boy, that density in that inner circle, in that inner ring of the heart, I think has affected the growth than just the health of the eastern red cedars. So 71% were in good or fair health, and there's significant invasive vine population, and that is mostly poison ivy. And as you both know, those can become large vines and heavy, and just they can have significant diameters, multiple inches. The middle ring is a bit healthier. 85% were in good health and a lot less invasive vine pressure. And the outer ring was the best health, and 90% were good or fair, with the least amount of vine population at 16%. Okay, so in terms of just how does it feel in there? I know both of you have been in there, but here I have a beautiful corridor among mostly eastern white pines in the outer ring. Here we're looking towards the middle ring, and the trees are smaller. There is a little bit more density, I'd say. And then we get into this thicket of the inner circle, inner heart rather, of the eastern red cedars. And the main issue with them is that these limbs, they just do not drop these low limbs. And of course, that just makes it extremely hard to move around, as I know you both experienced. I took a little video just to remind us of what it's like. So let me make sure you don't see that, right?
Not yet.
I don't see it. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna. Okay, so here we are in the outer ring of the pines, easy to move around in, very little growth on the ground. Start moving into the middle ring. That's a white oak, another white oak. You can see that herbaceous plants on the ground increase. I think it's just more sunlight is reaching in there. And I switched to moving into attempting to move from the middle ring into the inner heart. And it just starts to become very difficult with just, a thicket is a word I used, of these low branches of vines where it really becomes, you can't get around really unless you do have a hatchet, pruner, etc. So, yeah, summarize that here. The outer ring, very open, it's very pleasant. Middle ring has some more diversity of trees. It's a mix of open and, some density. And then the inner ring is just extremely dense. Okay, I know this heart shape is very important to this project. I flipped the direction here, so north is at the bottom. Superimposed a heart shape on this, and I assume this is basically rotated. This heart shape is rotated from the original. The tip was, I assume, was kind of more in this area, but we have to deal with the reality of that large riprap installation. But you know what? If we're being pragmatic, there's large cottonwood down in this tip that we can take advantage of as we clear out this area where the two halves of the heart meet. So, right, this area has filled in with volunteer trees. I think we can do something about it. We can talk about what you want to do down here, but my recommendation would be to go with what we have. We have large trees down here. They're not pines. And shifting kind of the orientation of the heart is something to consider for sure. The other thing that is possible now is that, this is the southeast. We could attempt to plant some eastern white pine or other pines in this area that has a lack of pines. And this is based on the assumption that this drainage problem has been mitigated, significantly enough that these trees might be happier there. In this area where we had a failure of the pines to establish, what we are seeing are these bald cypress. They're deciduous trees. In the summertime, people confuse them for conifers. But again, being pragmatic, let's work with what nature has decided is going to work there. And that is the bald cypress and then deciduous trees, elms were established there. Because some of the drainage, maybe all the drainage issues, we won't know that for years. They've been eradicated, the drainage problems. Then we could plant some pines and see what happens. So that's something to consider.
So Molly, stay with that. My assumption, first of all, I love the fact that the bald cypress kind of claimed that area. They're responding to the shift in moisture. But if we assume that their drainage solution works, then the cypress will like that less than they did when they showed up, right?
That's true. It'll be less wet. I mean,
yeah.
But we don't, bald cypress, they can, tolerate very well wet feet or having these wet ground. But they, we also see them in areas that, in landscaped areas that are not constantly wet. So I don't think they're going to immediately start to fail.
Okay.
We'll just have to see. And, frankly, the thought that there's going to be, that this area in the Northwest is going to be, as dry as this area in the Southwest that's pretty optimistic. This is still the low point topographically.
Right, right.
It's still going to get, water is still going to be drawn there. Okay, so you guys mentioned the desire for a trail, and based on what I showed you in that video, I would recommend that the trail features much of that outer ring as possible. It's just truly pleasant to be in it. It's just, it feels great. That inner ring, it's nice to see those white oaks and red oaks, and frankly some diversity. So meandering in and out of the middle ring, I would recommend that. Going to the center of the heart would be difficult. Certainly we can cut a path, we can prune and cut a path. But it would be a consideration of, once you're in there, what does it feel like? All around you is going to be this thicket, poison ivy. And it's just, I'm not sure it's worth it, frankly, if we're trying to produce, a very pleasant experience. But we can talk about that. I mentioned here the planting possibilities. So here and here, if we wanted to try some more pines, we can do that. These invasive vines, they're mostly affecting the eastern red cedars in the center. I wouldn't really try to challenge that too much, but vine pressure on some of the oaks, I would try to control that so that they have longest life possible. And same with the pines, although pressure is a lot less. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention is, this is a landscape feature. It is functioning, being treated as a natural forest at this point. And diversity has come in, particularly in this middle ring. I can't figure out for sure if all the trees that were listed in the planting plans, all the species that were listed, were they actually planted, because I didn't see the existence of many of those species. And, plans change year to year. What did the MDC have at that year? How many trees were planted, et cetera. But the fact is that in the outer ring and the inner ring, there's a lack of diversity. In this outer ring, we could introduce other pines. I did see some loblobby pines and Austrian and shortleaf. So we could, I'd probably recommend some more shortleaf pines. So that just, and this diversity that we're seeing in the middle ring, I would encourage that. So I'm sure you guys are familiar. Diversity is what's going to save us from either insect pressure, disease pressure. Just your losses will be much less if you have a diverse population. Okay, that's the my last slide.
So first of all, Molly, thanks for a great report. There are a lot of questions, and I don't know. Is this the time we allotted for this, or do we have more time?
I'm happy to meet with you guys anytime.
Okay.
So I have time right now, but if you want to meet again, it's fine.
Brian, how about you?
I've got time. I don't know if I'm smart enough or I know enough to, what are the right questions to ask. But yeah, I mean, I've got some time.
I'd like to spend a few minutes now, and then we'll reflect on this. And I think it'd be useful to have another conversation. But first of all, looking back on this, and I didn't challenge anything at the time of my friend Jerry Montroselli, who was the forester, who made these decisions, right? I mean, we had a concept for a heart-shaped forest, but he was the forester. He was our expert. And looking back, I don't know why we even used red cedar from Pennsylvania. Why wouldn't we have gone with all natives, right? I mean, that's the first thing. But beyond that, now that they're there, and they're such a dominant part of that experience, my inclination is to do what you said, and that is carve a path to the center. And I think Brian and I are in agreement that we need to have a place in the center where people can have a moment. And that means modifying what's there, because it's, as you mentioned, it's a briar patch now. And so if that's true, it implies to me a hell of a lot of work. I mean, of having volunteers go out and rip out all that ivy and on and on. And it's hard, we did that a few times. It wasn't ivy then, it was like bagworms and infestations that I was not willing to spray at the time. And so we did it all by hand. And we had a gazillion people out there as volunteers doing that work. And this would be another one of those if we were to undertake that. But I'm just reacting. I haven't thought through the implications and the risk involved in taking on such a mission. But I guess so that's a question. I'm going to skip on to another, so you can kind of answer it as an overall answer. The other is, what would happen if we don't manage this, just let it continue to naturalize, and we just kind of trim up the edge to make it look more like a heart, and then we reinforce that with stones or whatever our land painter decides is the most appropriate way to make a real heart-shaped perimeter in which we will locate the LED lighting. And then the last thing is, we have given the aviation department a plan. We have back a draft of an agreement that doesn't include the plan. And it looks like they're kind of excluding what we thought was the arrival area, an overlook, and a trail getting down to the heart. And so we have to work out that. But if we were to be successful in that, which I think we will be, then the question becomes, what do we put along the trail? And my first thoughts were we would do native grasses of some kind down to the forest, down to the perimeter stone ring. But since it's a forest, I mean, I could imagine some people saying, well, it should be trees on the south side of the trail. So let me just stop with that and give me, I guess, one other question to throw in there. If we just, well, I'll just reinforce maybe the first question. That is, what happens if we just kind of let it naturalize or rewild, if you will, and we just trim up the edge and we cut a path to the heart and we clear out enough in the center of the heart in order to have some kind of a memorial thing that represents the heart spirit and Leon and the idea. And maybe it has a QR code to hook people up with all the new information that we will be providing online, and they could get it while they're in the middle of the heart, or they could listen with this technology to what's going on in the heart, actually listen to what's going on in the trees.
Well,
considering those as possibilities, if you were in our shoes or if you were in charge of this, what would your recommendation be? Which of those directions would you take?
I would take this one that you're describing of working on the shape, particularly this area where in the south where the two of the heartbeat, and cutting a trail, and we cut a trail to the center. I think that's something you guys should pursue, because you don't have to wait on the aviation department. We can cut the trail, this year, and they're not going to stop you, right? And frankly, I don't know if it would. I don't know the timing of this plan with the aviation department, but if a trail was cut, I mean, it might be kind of more, gives your requests, there's more to it because you have this trail that you're trying to get people to use.
Yeah.
And so, obviously the most work will be on the trail cutting through the center and, creating a center. We have to decide how big that center is. That's entirely possible. And, frankly, as I mentioned, is something that could happen in the very short term.
Yeah.
Do you do that type of work, or have people that do that type of work?
I would bid for that myself. Pruning, there would be limited tree removal in the center, but I could handle that. And then this part at where the south, where the two halves meet, that will have to be an annual thing at the very least. But just knocking that stuff down. I'd love to give you guys a bid for that.
Okay. Well,
we can call up urban lumber and make stuff out of the wood.
I mean, I'm not seeing taking down any pines. So if they're
Right.
interested, and frankly, hauling eastern red cedars out of the center would be kind of a painful
Yeah.
job.
Well, my assumption was my assumption was those would get stripped down and cut up so you could just pull them out of there. You know,
Yeah,
that
or
you wouldn't
left.
just chop them off and try to get them out, or you'd have to rent a helicopter or something.
Yeah, I mean, I would propose just putting them outside the trail or outside the center. I would just leave them. I mean,
No, I mean the ones that you're cutting out in the heart of the heart to make a
oh,
space.
okay. Right. I mean, I don't think we have a, well, if with the orientation of the heart slightly shifted, I guess that is a possibility that we have some more significant trees, but yeah, anything that was that we could let decompose in the forest, I would let it.
Now, could we bring in a bunch of goats and help eat the poison ivy and vines and stuff like that?
I mean, I've heard of great success with the goats. So I frankly don't know if I assume they eat the poison ivy, but
I know they do.
okay.
I know they do. Yeah, they're good at it. It's a delicacy for them. It's amazing.
Well, I mean, that would be a super interesting thing to see what they do.
Their gourmet list is poison ivy and honeysuckle. So
okay.
It's amazing. Yeah, I think that is something we would probably do, is use some of the animals from good oak to help us do this work.
Okay.
I love the idea.
Another thing.
Oh, go ahead.
That's another thing we need airport permission on. There's no cattle roaming anywhere on airport land now. But I think we could pull that off.
Yeah, because it would just be for a few days, right?
Yeah, right.
I love the idea of the native grasses and the trail. And as much as painful it is to do the heart of the heart, I think we have to justify that with what is it that we would do there that would justify all that work. But I like the idea of the shaping and all that stuff. And we have a lot more information than we did starting out. So it's exciting.
So Molly, I have a lot of questions, but for now, I'll just limit it to this one. If we did nothing, what would this look like in another 20 years or 50 years or 100 years?
I think the eastern red cedar would start becoming more of a dominant forest. They're already like the third most common tree in third or fourth in this middle ring. So I would imagine that would start encroaching outward, assuming that we don't have any significant disease or pest problems with the pines. I mean, they look pretty good. And so I assume they would still be there. And of course, we have young pines growing in that ring. So they're regenerating on their own. So yeah, I think the unfortunate thing would be that these cedar would start encroaching outward.
So
that's one thing I think we should intervene on. I think we should prevent that, just so it doesn't all become a tangled mess, number one, and number two, so it has some order in terms of image from the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, just the eastern red cedar are just not that pleasant to be around. So
I
the
couldn't
more
agree
that,
more.
yeah, the more that
Okay.
we control them, yeah, the better, because there really are some not large, but lovely white pines, or sorry, white oaks and red oaks in this area. So I don't think we'd lose those that are already nicely established, but I think the eastern red cedar would shade out the seedlings of new oaks, and that would be a shame.
Yeah, right. Right. Okay. Well, so in very rough terms, what kind of money do we need to raise to do the kind of work you've just outlined?
I mean, I'll just roughly I'll just say 4,000, I mean, that's not a bid, but just.
Yeah. That's what I wanted. I mean, some magnitude thing. Well, first of all, this is very helpful, and let us take this. We have another meeting coming up with our buddies at Barclay, and we have some work to do, but we would like to finish this contract with aviation. By the way, we would not go in before they sign the agreement, even though they probably wouldn't fight us or stop us. But we just don't want to do that because that could jeopardize the quality long-term agreement.
Okay.
So
we're at the very end of that lease conversation. So
yeah.
It's all good.
So anyway, we'd like to get the agreement in place, get clear with Barclay on some things that we're working with them on right now for the hard forest, and then get back to you and figure out a strategy for taking this first cut at implementing the restoration of the forest. And in the meantime, we'll talk to Good Oak about some goats and what that would take. So you and the goats could work in coordination.
Okay, that'd be fun. See what they do.
We might be able to also do some volunteer days where we all come out and help. I wouldn't mind helping with the trail, just to kind of get inside with myself. I will, if you do want to go ahead and kind of think about what we talked about in terms of the trail creation and the design refinement, the shape, just kind of what it's going to cost, like a more precise bid. I think that would kind of keep the ball moving.
Okay.
That's a good point. I didn't say this because I haven't thought it through, but I will, just so you're aware. I have the urge to compromise between the new shape you've created, which is an obvious, and I appreciate the recommendation, and a modification of that's somewhere between what it is now and what you have drawn. And the reason is I think it would require less cutting on the two sides, and it's going to be more consistent with the tree shapes that are already planted. And I think it could be a little fatter. While you've drawn kind of the perfect heart, we could modify that and save ourselves time and energy and be more consistent with what was already planted if we solve the problem at the two ends, I think.
Yeah, I wasn't really recommending actually removing this stuff, if that's what you're talking about.
That is what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the other thing is, like up at the top, at the south end, I should say, clearly we have to cut some stuff out of there, no question about it. But having done so, then at the bottom of the point where we've got now the big rocks and so on, I think Stan Hurd may help us solve that problem with whatever we choose to do about making the perimeter. And so that would give us could give us a little more flexibility on what we have to plant or what we have to cut. And so what I'd like to do is, now that we've gotten this far, I'd like to share this with Stan, get these other pieces in place, and then decide what we're doing and get a proposal from you, get the goats lined up, and launch.
Okay. Sounds good. I'm going to resend the report that you guys have. I saw one typo that if you're going to distribute this to other folks,
okay,
I'd like that to be resolved.
Very good. Very good.
Sounds great. I'll forward this video to Stan, and Stan, if you're listening, we need your help. So let's make this a beautiful heart shape. And I think that I think in the contract we have about 100 feet around the heart perimeter that we're asking for. So that gives us a little room for the stones and the lights and all the things. So thank you so much, Molly. I really appreciate all the work that you put into this, and it gives us like a good sense of things that we needed to start to regenerate the heart forest.
Yeah, I'll ditto that, Molly. I'm pretty sure that Leon Shenandoah is smiling down at you now.
Wow, thank you. I mean, that's pretty cool. It's a really cool project, and I was delighted to work on it.
Awesome. Well, y'all have a wonderful day.
You guys too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.